Hello, thanks for joining us on Special Report Online. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. If this is your first time on board, welcome. It's a great place to come for the conversation to continue with our panel. We want to hear from you, so ask questions, make comments. Our panel, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, Anna Palmer, senior Washington correspondent for Politico, Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief for The Weekly Standard. Apologize for cutting everybody off, but we had that news conference, obviously. What do you take from today, Molly, about not only this terror suspect and what he's bragging about, but also how the administration is reacting to it?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I do think it is interesting that he came in on the visa lottery program. This is one of the things that the administration has said they want to get rid of. And this was a big part of the success of Donald Trump in the election last year, was his call to have a more cohesive immigration policy, one that isn't just about leaving it up to chance, but actually having it where people match with the needs of the country. And so their merit-based program would focus on education, English language skills, job prospects, sort of a track record of accomplishment. And when you look at so many of these terrorists, it's not that they're not bright people or whatnot, but they don't necessarily have the good job prospects lined up and whatnot. And there are ways that we could just be doing a much healthier way of thinking about who's going to become part of this country, and I think this will put a lot of pressure on people to move that way.
A couple of prominent Democrats weighed in on what they saw as politicizing this day, Senator Schumer and the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio.
I've seen the tweets from President Trump. President Bush, in a moment of national tragedy, understood the meaning of his high office and sought to bring our country together. President Trump, where is your leadership?
I don't think anyone should be politicizing this this tragedy.
Let me be really clear. The president has not blamed Senator Schumer and doesn't feel that the senator is responsible for the attack. However, we do think that there are policies that could be put in place that help protect American citizens.
And Anna, we should point out just moments ago, the president tweeted again on this issue, saying chain migration must end now. Some people come in and they bring their whole family with them who can be truly evil, not acceptable. So obviously he feels emboldened by this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think having President Trump talk tough on terror is not surprising. And I think we actually was looking at some polling that Politico Morning Consult has recently done. 45% of the respondents on these polls said that they want America and the U.S. to get tougher on terror. So if you actually look at where kind of the public is, what Trump is saying resonates with them. They're tired of kind of the class of politicians trying to just be politically correct on these kinds of things. And I do think this is an area where he kind of wins. He's not talking about Russia. He's not talking about Obamacare. Talking about terror and being tough on terror is an area where he's very comfortable.
Yeah, and part of the pitch is not only the immigration, but political correctness, Steve, overall. That's how he talks.
You know, I was struck during the broadcast when Molly was talking about, just who this person is and the fact that he wanted to put an ISIS flag up in his hotel room. I mean,
hospital room.
Hospital room. We know that because it's now been reported. Presumably this is what he told investigators. But, if he hadn't said that, if we didn't know that, would people even be willing to call this an ISIS attack? So many times in the past, if you want to go back to Fort Hood or go back to other incidents, there's been an effort to sort of define down terror attacks. And President Trump doesn't do that. I mean, he says, I think sometimes too aggressively, sometimes too early, but he says with complete clarity, this is a terrorist attack and we can't stand for it anymore. We're going to make policy changes to address it. I agree with Ann entirely. I mean, I think that is his greatest strength in moments like this. Now, there's going to come a time when he gets out in front of something and he could be wrong about it, and that'll be a problem too. But he always errs on this side, and he's been right more often than he's been wrong so far.
But after 8 years of hedging
yes.
or holding back, or even the Christmas Day bomber was
workplace violence. Right. Remember, they called him an isolated extremist, despite the fact that he had confessed to having been trained. We got bad information on these terrorist attacks for the better part of 8 years, honestly, in an effort to downplay the threat. President Trump is either, depending on your view, seeing the threat clearly and calling it as it is, or overstating the threat, probably, according to liberal critics.
Disappointing about the discussions about the diversity lottery program. Everybody seemed to agree that this is a bad program, but then they started fighting about who was responsible, and you had them saying, like, oh, we actually tried to get rid of it, and that those mean House Republicans wouldn't do it.
It was the gang of 8 that had it in the comprehensive immigration plan, which also failed.
That is true, but like the actual story there is they put it up as a chip, as a bargaining chip to get amnesty, and when it failed, they say, oh, hey, we tried. Well, if you think it's a bad program, and everybody thinks it's a bad program, show some leadership, get rid of the program, and don't, you can actually care a little bit more about the nation's security more than bargaining chips.
Senator David Perdue from Georgia has a bill, I saw today, that is moving forward on this very issue. Anna, you were going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is he certainly has clarity of thought in terms of what he wants to have happen, but delivery. Can he actually deliver on any of these policies that he says are so important? Can he find Republicans even to go forward and kind of push these policies through all the way through Congress? Very tough. This is also not what Republicans, no matter the tragedy, want to actually be talking about. They have their tax bill they've been spending months on. I think House Republicans believe that their majorities are at stake based on that, not based on whether or not some of this legislation gets fixed on terrorism.
Well, this is where I think Molly makes a good point. I mean, maybe it's time to instead of having all of these comprehensive bills where you layer one thing on another because you need to get this particular senator for this issue and he or she wouldn't be with. If there's actual consensus here, and maybe this consensus will disappear within a week. I mean, people have short-term memories. But if there's actual consensus on this, move a bill. Do it. Do it quickly.
But let me just ask something broadly about this program. What is the impetus of it? Do we need more diversity? Is that the genesis of the bill? Is that the diversity we need Uzbekistan to be better represented in New York City?
I mean, I think there probably was good intent at the beginning, an idea that certain countries were being favored, we were getting a lot of people from certain countries, and other countries weren't getting in through other programs.
And thereby put them in a lottery system.
Right, it just pretty quickly became apparent that it wasn't working out so well. And it also is just, there's this idea that immigration should be random, and that once people get in, then they should bring in their entire families. This is very different from how other countries handle immigration, which is to think who would be a good fit for the country, who could have job skills that match with what we need, who has the proper educational background. This is not like a mean, awful thing. This is what Canada does, it's what Australia does, and these are not radical countries that are not letting people in. They're just thinking more thoughtfully about how to make immigration work for the country.
Yeah, I mean, this is clearly an issue that Congress is going to have to delve into pretty deeply.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue for them, right, is they're going to have to delve deeply on this, but they're also going to have to really focus on, for Democrats to get on board. I totally understand what you're saying. That yes, it would be great if they could just do one thing at a time. This is Congress. Yeah. The way that it works, or the dysfunction and how it doesn't work.
A boy can dream, right? I
mean, past is precedent. That's never going to happen. And so the other real question is, I think, could you try to get some kind of a compromise with the Dreamers, with DACA, which both Republicans and Democrats are working on through several different packages, and I think there's an expectation maybe in December or January that actually gets addressed.
SOWTF. Interesting. President Trump is spot on. Acting quickly on this is highly appropriate. Please, some people are having a tough time. Just restart if you can't. Well, you can't hear me anyway, so tell your friends to restart the thing. We got it working. And there's a lot of people on here asking about, can the president actually get rid of that visa program without the courts overruling him every time? That's a good question. I think that this program is pretty small as opposed to the travel ban that we've seen challenged in different courts.
Well, either way, though, there have been a lot of pretty extreme judicial challenges that probably are not going to hold up in the long run. This idea that the president doesn't have authority to talk about various immigration policies is probably not good for the long run. But the one thing that helps this diversity program going away is that not a lot of people are big fans of it. So you won't see the challenges probably that you saw for some of these other policies.
Well, and if you would have 2 days ago, you won't now.
Right.
I mean, after this.
All right, here is the president today talking about the process as it stands right now in the cabinet room.
We also have to come up with punishment that's far quicker and far greater than the punishment these animals are getting right now. We need quick justice, and we need strong justice, much quicker and much stronger than we have right now. Because what we have right now is a joke, and it's a laughingstock.
Now, some people took that as he was talking about the U.S. judicial system as a joke and a laughingstock. The White House tried to push back, saying that this was the process on this issue. Thoughts?
I mean, I think clearly the wheels of justice will turn as slowly or as fast as they always do. They're processing this case as they do of any kind of terrorism case like this. The question, if he indeed was talking about the process of removing this, it probably will be a lot slower than he wants. I don't think anybody should be surprised by that.
So, seeing that in context, which just happened for the first time for me, I'm kind of appalled at how this was treated on social
all
media.
Day.
This was treated as if he was saying
not just
that
social
the entire
media.
world is is laughing at us when he's, this is actually true that you do not want to have delays of justice. That's good not just for the accused, but for the people who are seeking justice for wrongdoing. And the way that this was misunderstood. I mean, if you don't understand what he's saying well enough to report on it, you have no business covering this president. And if you're willfully misstating what he's saying, you also have no business covering it. And people are so sick of this type of treatment of what he says.
Right. So he obviously, in 140 characters or less, there's not a lot of nuance there. So the tweets are read all different kinds of ways, but that was pretty clear, it seemed to me, Steve. He was also asked whether this suspect should go to Guantanamo Bay, and he said he would consider that. Yes, he would consider it. Senator Graham has said he should be an enemy combatant. John McCain has said he should be an enemy combatant. The acting U.S. attorney said it's a decision above his pay grade today. So do we think he's going to Gitmo?
I don't know. I mean, the Gitmo question, I don't see the advantage necessarily of sending him to Gitmo. I mean, if you can come up with a compelling reason, I wouldn't be opposed to sending
particularly if you don't want to delay justice.
To Gitmo. Right. I mean, the Gitmo, the justice at Gitmo
because the tribunal's not set
is
up.
awfully slow. He seems to be cooperating. I think it's the government should take as much time as they need to make sure that we're getting every piece of information. He seems to want to talk about this.
He waived his Miranda rights. They was read the Miranda.
Yeah,
rights.
I would have.
Really interesting.
Yeah,
you have a national security window that you can ask him all kinds of questions without reading his rights. But they did.
Yeah,
he waived it verbally, and the investigators.
This is one of these things that I thought that I think people assumed would go away with Donald Trump. I mean, Barack Obama, remember the Christmas Day bomber, to go back to your earlier example, read his Miranda rights awfully fast once he was here in the United States. Once he was there, and stopped talking, and we, could see he was talking for a little while. Then he stopped talking. Then he started talking again. But the question of the intelligence value of that in a law enforcement context was, I think, not clear. I think if you can delay the reading of the Miranda rights, you do it. In this case, maybe it wouldn't have made any difference because he was talking anyway. On the question of the quote, this is the first time I saw it, like Molly. I mean, Donald Trump is sometimes unclear and ambiguous, and you can take his words any number of different ways. You read the transcripts that he has of long interviews, and you don't know what he's saying or what he's trying to convey. This was clear. I mean, he was clearly talking about these terrorists and the process of bringing them to justice. And it is interesting, having watched all this being misportrayed everywhere. I mean, I think it was rather unfair to the president in this instance.
We're getting sources telling us that the second guy the FBI was looking for, and authorities in New York were looking for as well, they've found him. He is a person of interest, but they don't believe that he was behind the plot, but that he may have had knowledge of this plot before it happened. Right now, he's not being charged, but they are talking to him. So that's how these things work. I mean, they try to piece together who this guy has been talking to and who knew what when.
Yeah, it's the web, right? And I mean, part of what they've already said is that he had been a person of interest around other people, that he was a known kind of entity, whether, but this is a kind of a different plot. They're trying to systematically figure out what did he know, how was he radicalized, and then who else might, be in his orbit as well.
It is kind of interesting how transparent they're being about what's going on in their investigation here. And we are a month out of the Vegas attack, which is like the worst mass shooting in the world. And we still have very little knowledge. They're not really explaining all the weirdness. I mean, it's just a weird story.
There's a lot of different stories about what actually happened.
And we don't really have a lot of transparency. And I don't know if that's for law enforcement or national security reasons or what, but it would be great to have a lot more information. It kind of helps when there is a terror attack in New York City to get a little update. You feel like it helps you be confident in the
There's so much we don't know about Las Vegas still, and I think that we still need to know much, much more, and it's not finished there. We're going to actually have a reporter out there very soon to follow up on some of the questions about that attack. But I want to turn to, I want to ask you about this. You know, you're talking about coverage. Today, the White House was asked whether the president agrees that slavery was wrong.
Yeah, that's how our media are acting right now. They're acting like it's legitimate to ask questions like that of this White House. They're so oppositional. They decided that going through 2016, they weren't oppositional enough, that the problem was that they weren't fighting a Republican candidate enough. So now they've just decided to be all in on all having the same idea about how to oppose the president. And I don't actually think it's a very good approach for the media, including that they're upset when anyone doesn't share their approach on a given story, whether Bob Mueller can in any way be criticized for how he's handling something. If you have even the slightest doubt, you are to be condemned, according to our media, as if the job of the media is to be utterly deferential to special prosecutors with unlimited prosecutorial power. And when people see these types of questions, I think media reporters encourage each other and they act like they're really doing a good job, and everybody else, it increases their distaste for the media, and it's an unwise thing.
I should point out that this comes after the interview with the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, where he was explaining negotiations and pointed back to the Civil War. I didn't fully follow his, as he laid it out there, what he was trying to get to, Steve, in the soundbite with Laura Ingraham. But the fact that we got to that question today in the briefing room was quite something.
Yeah, I mean, he's a smart guy by all accounts. People have worked with him, people have known him, think he's a bright guy. I didn't think that was his best moment. I mean, it was he talk about ambiguous meaning and lack of clarity. I mean, you can go back and revisit that, and then there was the back and forth with Sarah Huckabee Sanders about what he meant that I think actually had the effect of muddying the waters further. This question seems to be a bit of a stretch about whether the president's pro-slavery. But look, I'm in favor of the Trump administration making more people available to reporters, to journalists, more. But in this case, I think doing that, putting him out in that case, created some controversy that they didn't need.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just say this didn't come in a vacuum. This question didn't come out of this race and kind of marches and what's been happening in Charlottesville and other places, I think is what draws questions like these out. I also think the media, I mean, there's tension there clearly in terms of, what the previous administration issued on some of these things are and where this administration is. And I think that's part of what this is all about.
He does go out a lot, the president does, and talks to media. I mean, the cabinet room, it's almost every day we get something from the president. Clearly his Twitter is as transparent as we've ever seen a president be with his inner thinking. It's not like we don't know where he stands.
The problem with his president might not be too little transparency, but way too much. We know his inner thoughts. He's running his inner monologue publicly. It's a very curious thing. But on this actual larger story, I think this story has been poorly covered from the get-go, and that you're seeing too little intellectual diversity in newsrooms to understand and cover this story in a way that represents the values of all Americans. And so you have something like a discussion on the Civil War, the North won, the South lost, and then we reunited as a country. You have had people speak about the importance of reunification and a shared, understanding ourselves as one nation, not occupiers of the South, but one nation. There can be this way of everybody herding toward one approach on discussions that leaves out a lot of nuance and, again, a lot of the values of a lot of Americans. And if you pit it where it's just like either you're on the right side or you're this horrible defender of slavery, that's just lazy, and it's not appropriate.
I should point out that, I think the point he generically was making was that our history is our history, and that it is our history, and we should look back at
Eisenhower spoke in favor of Robert E. Lee's leadership, and he wasn't called a defender of slavery, and I don't think that
No,
I don't think he was trying to refight the Civil War.
I think Anna has a point here. I mean, this didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, you go back to the original Jake Tapper interview on David Duke. The president had trouble answering that question. He didn't answer it very well, and then when he answered it, when he was asked subsequently on the Today Show, I think what he said wasn't true.
I think you also
he said I didn't hear it.
You need to go
that's
back
a problem.
even further, too, though, which is a general media posture toward anyone right of center as motivated by bigotry. And this is the media climate in which, if you are trying to battle that, it can be difficult to battle that. There are certain ways where, this last week or this week, there was an ad run in Virginia that accused people who support Ed Gillespie of running down immigrant children. Jake Tapper, I don't believe, called up Ralph Northam and said, please denounce this, please denounce this.
We should point out that
nobody asked him or maybe they asked him, but they didn't ask all the Democrats on the Hill to denounce. But if, there are these double standards that are a larger context that also is in play.
That is very true. And it was pulled in part because the day that it was still running, a guy in a pickup truck ran down pedestrians in New York City, as that ad has a Confederate flagged, draped pickup truck going after kids in Virginia.
My point is a simple one. Just because there are these double standards, and I agree with you entirely about the double standards, doesn't mean that this line of questioning is sometimes not appropriate. I think Anna makes a good point about the context here. The president has said things in the past, whether he was talking about Judge Curiel, whether he was not denouncing David Duke, not because the mainstream media wants him to denounce David Duke, but because you denounced David Duke, and then he pretended he didn't know who David Duke was. Well, he had denounced David Duke before. He had talked about him before. It was the president wasn't being straightforward in that context. I think it's fair to ask questions about some of these things, particularly when what he said after Charlottesville.
All right. Well, the bigger point is that we've just spent a bunch of minutes talking about this, but it became an issue this week, and you have to address it. I don't think that there's, with all that's going on, a big hunger to relitigate the Civil War. Is the point.
There are a few other things that we might be focusing on.
I mean, a few other issues. Panel, that's great. I'm going to wrap up here. I know a lot of people are asking for an update on Charles. I want to tell you that he is slowly recovering. He's transferred to a different facility where he's getting better every day. He had some tough times after a surgery that he was expecting to be back from in just a couple of weeks. But I received an email from him just the other day. He's in good spirits, and we hope to have him back here very soon. So I'll continue to give you an update. I'm not going to give you the ins and outs of the specifics because I think that's their family's decision to do. But I'll tell you that he's improving, and we hope to have him back soon. All right. With that, thank you very much. This is a special report online. We try to do it every Wednesday. Control room, a little goodbye.